But we're going to be looking at Jephthah today. And he is one of my favorite judges. Even though he wasn't necessarily a great man, there's so much in this text that we can apply today. So as we look back at where we've come from, we are on judge number 6, but technically this is judge, I think, number 9 or 10. We saw there was a few judges we missed that we didn't go through, but we talked in the very beginning. We saw Othniel and how the Lord will do, just how far the Lord will go to get our attention. And then from Othniel, we looked at Ehud, and we looked at what it looks like to deal with sin, and that dealing with sin gets messy, right? If we let it go, it's a very dirty job to deal with sin. We looked at Deborah, the woman judge who rises to the occasion in a world without leadership, and she steps into the void, and what it looks like to lead in a world that's not leading. And to be a face and a voice for Jesus Christ in a world that's not there, right? Where that voice and that face is not there. Then we looked at Gideon, and we looked at Gideon's fears and how God moved him from coward to courageous judge. And then ultimately, the next week we looked at his doubts and how God took away his doubts by showing himself over and over and over again to Gideon. Well, today we're going to look at Jephthah. And what I love about this is going to be a 2-part sermon as well, because what you see in his life is he is a fantastic leader at some points, and then there's some things that he does that are really bad. And so what I want us to do is we're going to look at the do's and the don'ts. And this week specifically, we're going to be looking at the do's. Interestingly enough, what we all love, it's amazing how it's all through our pop culture, it's in our television, it's in our movies. We are a culture that loves the underdog, right? We love the guy who is losing or shouldn't win, but ultimately comes back. And matter of fact, most movie themes are kind of based on this line, right? Where you find somebody who is in insurmountable odds comes back to win or comes back to be the hero of the story. And we were taught this, right? We were taught this as kids, that the underdog, root for the underdog. Do you guys remember Underdog? You guys remember this cartoon, Underdog? I mean, it was Saturday morning cartoons. Underdog would show up, you know. He was the shoeshine, shoeshine boy? And his alter ego was Underdog, remember this? And he was the hero of the story. You remember? And he would show up, and he was just the little mutt that couldn't do it, and he was the riffraff gang and Sinister somebody. Simon Bar Sinister. Anyway, I'm sorry. I used to watch it, and I love it. He spoke in couplets. Never fear, underdog is here, right? Everything he said was in a couplet, you know. Well, the reason we loved him so much is because he literally would. He would show up on the scene, and he was the one that wasn't supposed to win. He wasn't the tallest, wasn't the biggest, wasn't the strongest, and he would always win, right? And that was the moral of the bad tale that we were taught, that the underdog is here, and he's going to somehow take care of the bad guy. We love those stories. We live for those stories, and what we see today is that story. We see an underdog character who steps up, who's rejected by everyone and comes back to be the leader. And it's a really beautiful story of what God will do. And this is an interesting judge story. You know, as you go through the cycles, remember we've talked about the cycles from Israel would sin against the Lord, and they would go into slavery, and that's what happens here. And the Amorites are going to enslave them, are going to be ruling over them and punishing them, right, for what they've done. And as that happens, the Israelites are going to cry out to the Lord. And what we've seen up to this point is in that supplication, God shows up and he brings about a deliverer who ultimately brings salvation and then peace for the people over a long period of time. This is the first time that that's different. What we see in this story in chapter 10 is that the people are in bondage and slavery. They cry out to the Lord, and God says, "You're on your own," which is very different than what we've seen. And ultimately, we see them repent even further to the place where they're tearing down idols and they're throwing away the Baal and they're pulling down the Asherah. And you've seen, and God has mercy on them. You see the phrase, and God had mercy on them. But you don't see the phrase that you've seen in every other judge, which is, and God raised up a deliverer, or God showed up somewhere, or God appeared to this man. You don't see that. The next thing you see is the story of Jephthah's life, or Jephthah, however you want to say it. You see the story of his life, and God doesn't show up again till later in the story. So what we want to do today is we want to look at the do's. When you get a bottle of medicine, the first thing they want you to do at the pharmacy is go talk to a pharmacist. Why? Because they don't want you to screw this up. They don't want you to mess this up. If you take this incorrectly, it could harm you. So they tell you the do's twice a day at meals or whatever. And then they also say, hey, wait a second, don't do this. Don't take more than this much. Don't give this to your dog. It could kill it. All those kinds of things. They let you know what not to do. Well, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at, as the church, we're going to take this text and we're going to look at what he did and we're going to translate it to the 21st century. We're going to look at what he did and the truths that we can pull from this, and we're going to pull it into our own life. And then next week, we're going to look at what not to do, how not to feed this to your dog. So let's look at the text. The first question we're going to look at is what does Jephthah do as a leader? What are some of the do's that we can pull? And there's going to be three things that we're going to see specifically. How he leads. He's going to lead in three ways that we're going to see, and we're going to expound on those specifically. And the first thing you're going to see is that he leads in reputation. He leads in reputation, and we all understand that reputation can be a very big deal when it comes to leadership, right? If you know somebody or you've heard of somebody, you're much more likely to think of them or follow them if their reputation has been good. If it shows that this person has the qualities that I would want to follow. I remember when I was in college, and I can remember having my friends, kind of overhearing a conversation with my friends. We were all planning on meeting up somewhere, and then we were going to all go out and watch a movie or go have dinner or something, me and a bunch of my friends. And I can remember us all talking about the conversation. They said something to the effect of, hey, let's meet at like 6 o'clock or something. And I said, but wait, I thought the movie didn't start till like 7. And they're like, yeah, well, we know we have to meet 30 minutes early because you're going to be 30 minutes late. Why? You just got here. Haven't been here for like a month and you're like, I'm just kidding. That's my reputation. I was going to show up 30 minutes late, and they knew it. So my friends would plan so that I could get there on time. See, we all have these little things. That's a bad one, right? We all have little things that we're known for. Since I heard that, you know what it did? It offended me. I was like, how dare you? I am never late. I am wounded. But then I realized, oh man, yeah, they're right. Yeah, I'm always late. This is horrible. I'm horribly late. And I worked on it, and I changed that. And so now I hope that's not my reputation, right? 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 But anyway, this is what reputation is about. We're going to look more deeply into this, but he leads through this thing that is his reputation. And it's an interesting story. So the first thing you're going to see in this is he is known for his bravery. Look at verse 1 of chapter 11. Jephthah is known for his bravery. Now, Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a valiant warrior. Stop right there. This term, valiant warrior, is typically a Hebrew phrase used for someone who is of importance or pedigree. He's a person who was born into a family who had scribes in a community. That's the phrase that's used here. And as they describe him, you're going to see why he's seen this way as a person who is a person of pedigree or a person who had status. We see this in our own communities. There's certain people who we would recognize as, oh, this person, they are, the governor's son. You ever name drop where you've played golf or you saw somebody, you had dinner with somebody of pedigree or importance? And that's the kind of phrase you see here. It's not just that he's brave, specifically that he is, but that he's a person of recognized status, and this status is that of a brave warrior, Okay, so that's the first piece of his reputation. Keep going with me. The next piece is his past is going to come into play. So he's going to have something about his past that he's going to be known for. Look at the text. Finish out in verse 1 there. But he was the son of a harlot. Okay, stop right there. He's a prostitute's son. Yet he's a man of pedigree and recognition. But his mom was a prostitute. And he's a Gileadite. Look at who his dad is. And Gilead was the father of Jephthah. Now, Gilead is a region, and I'm going to show you a map here in just a little bit so we can see where it is. It's a region east of the Jordan River, and it's named after Gilead. And so a lot of scholars believe that it's specifically named for Gilead, Jephthah's dad, in this area, and that he is the kind of the leader of this area, so it's been named after him. All right, so he's a Gileadite. His dad was Gilead. So think about this. His dad had another woman in his life, and Jephthah was born to her. So look what happens. Gilead's wife, his wife, bore him sons, and when his wife's sons grew up, they drove Jephthah out and said to him, "You shall not have an inheritance in our father's house, for you are the son of another woman." See, this is his past. And he's known for this. And so his whole town, his whole region, they said, we don't want, you're not, when dad dies, you don't get any of this because you're not pure blood. You're not of our family. And they kicked him out. So he's not only known for his bravery, he's also, his reputation precedes him as being the son of a harlot. Look at the next thing you see. He's also known specifically for his skills as a leader. For he's a good leader. And this is going to come out further in the text, but look at how this happens. So Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. Okay, now Tob is actually up north of the Sea of Galilee. It's east of the Sea of Galilee, but it's up north of Gilead. And so it's going to be further into the desert to the east of the Sea of Galilee. Look at what else it says. And he gathered, and worthless fellows gathered themselves to Jephthah, and they went out with him. And what you find is that this word "worthless fellows," it's not just a bunch of bad guys. The phrase is more wild men, adventurous men. The picture that I keep getting painted to me as I study this text is that of like a Robin Hood fellow. So you've got Jephthah as Robin Hood and all of his little merry men who are out robbing from the rich, right? They're bandits. They're out there in the hills and they're making a living any way they can, right? They're tough guys, but they're wild, all right? So the first thing we see as a leader is he's a leader by reputation. He is known. And I want to stop right here for a second because I think this is a very important thing for us to translate into our own world. How is the church known in our world today? Are we known for our love? Maybe. Depends on the circle. You know, if you're at a soup kitchen, you might be not know love. But if you're here on Sunday morning and from outside world's perspective, you're probably not known for that, unfortunately, right? We're not necessarily known for our love. How about this? Are we known for our hypocrisy? Yes, we are. Everybody should be shaking your head. You are, if you know it or not, spoiler alert, you're known for your hypocrisy. In this world, the world looks at us in the church and they see hypocrisy because why? Because we're hypocrites. It's pretty easy, right? We say things and do other things. Now stop. To our defense, does the rest of the world do this? Yes. This is a plague of humanity. We are hypocrites. Now, we don't think we are because we all have the woebegone effect, right? We all think we're better than we are, right? The men are all handsome and the women are all tough or something like that or whatever it is. We all think we're better than we are. And so nobody wants to think. The church doesn't want to think we're hypocrites because we do good things, right? We support great ministry. We're out sharing the gospel or doing whatever. But when it comes to the analyzation of each human being's life, there is a measure of hypocrisy where we say one thing and then act upon another. This is just how we are. And what we as the church have done is we come in and we should realize it, right? We realize it. I hope we should realize it. We confess it. We give it to the Lord and we ask Him to discipline us, help us to see that we might act as our mouth and our Word of God says we should act, right? We try and we repent and we keep moving forward. But that's the reality, is our reputation has kicked us into a place where we're not known for really the things we should be known for as a church. So if we're to take a do from Jephthah, it's to learn, we have to build a reputation. And this is what's so important about the local church. Not just the global church, but the local church. We, as Benchmark, and all the other little churches in this community have an opportunity to do something really amazing in this community. And that is to change the reputation. Right? We have that opportunity. We have the opportunity to be the people that God has called us to be the church that not only speaks truth, but also is loving. To be the church that not only stands for the high view and the righteousness of our God and King and defend that, but also with the gentle touch of Jesus can do. Gentle beauty of the hands and feet of Christ. Amen? That's what we can do. We have that charge. So as leaders, we want our reputation. We want people outside this church, or let me just say this. I want all of you, when you leave this place and you see somebody, to go, oh, you have got to come and visit the people of my church. You know what I'm saying? I don't want us to be a church that builds ourselves up on a holy hill that no one can ultimately reach. You know, I want this to be a church where everybody goes, oh, you've got to come. You've got to meet these people. There's something happening in this church. You've got to come. Your lost friends, your neighbors, I want you to be in a position where you go, you've got to come. Oh, something's happening. The Lord is doing something. And we want that for every church, right? We want that in every church, that the world would go, what is going on? And that the people of God would be going, you've got to come see this. You've got to come be a part of this. Let me introduce you to my brother, my sister. You've got to come to this party. Hey, come join us for dinner. You see what I'm saying? That all of a sudden the reputation of Jesus is no longer that He's the leader of a band of hypocrites, but that He's a band of people who are true to the Word and are exemplifying the love that He stood for, right? Stands for. All right, so let's look at the next thing we see. Not only does Jephthah lead through his reputation, but as we get into this, we're going to see that this guy really does have a lot of character. This guy, even though he's the son of a prostitute, he was raised in a family by a man who somehow, this guy was educated on the ways and the things of God. And he does things in a very honorable way. So let's look at this. The first thing you see is that he doesn't ignore the problem. So what's the problem? What's the problem from verse 2 and 3? The problem is that he was treated wrongly. Have you ever been treated wrongly? Has somebody ever done something to you that they should not have done? What do we typically do? Either you blow up on them, right? You give them the what for, or you just ignore it. We typically, a lot of times, depends on your personality. You know, if you're a sensitive person or somebody who doesn't like conflict, you might just choose to ignore it. You might martyr yourself and lay yourself down for the team, take it for the team, so to speak. But you might have the personality that goes, that ain't right, and I'm sick of people who ain't right, and I'm going to go deal with this. And you blow up on him, right? Well, watch how he handles on this. Watch what he does. Look at his character. Verse 5, when the sons of Ammon fought against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. And they said to Jephthah, come and be our chief, that we may fight against the sons of Ammon. Now, there's a couple things that you could be looking at here. See, Jephthah brought together a band of men, and he may technically have the only real standing army in the land, right? He may be one of the guys who has dedicated men who are out banditing, and therefore they're going to him because they need somebody who's been technically fighting a lot, and we need some help. That could be one thing, but I think it's beyond this. I think they know that he's their one chance of getting the Amorites to back off. And we're going to see a little more of the history here in a little bit, but notice what Jephthah does. Then Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "Did you not hate me?" I love that phrase. He doesn't say, bygones are bygones. He addresses the problem, doesn't he? He doesn't just lay down and go, "Okay, guys, well, I'll come help you." No, he says, wait. There's something between us. And we're going to have to talk about it. I'm not going to come help you. Didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Was I not a son of Gilead as well? You drove me from my father's house. Did I not deserve inheritance too, and you stole it from me? So why have you come to me now when you are in trouble? See, I think this is an act of character. I think this is a piece that we as the church ought to learn from. There are all kinds of things happening in our world that sometimes the church buries its head in the sand. That we just bury our head in the sand and don't want to deal with because it's confrontational. And we feel like, in order to exhibit the love of Jesus, I can't deal with this problem. I've just got to back off. And I want you to know that that's not true. We as a church don't have to back off from things that we see in our culture that fly in the face of our God and our King. And it doesn't mean that we pick up picket, what do you call them, signs, I almost said pitchforks and torches, but that's a different group. That we don't grab signs and start, blocking the road and won't let people pass till they acknowledge that this is a problem. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that I believe that we engage in conversation, right? Somebody, don't raise your hand on this because I don't want to see it. But how many of you know somebody who is not a believer and when it comes to the things of God believes very strongly differently than what God would say in His Word? We all do. Do you avoid talking about the things of God and His righteousness for sake of not dealing with the problem? Yes. And this is a bit of character that I love that Jephthah brings, is he doesn't ignore this problem. You treated me bad, and I want to talk about it because I don't want you to hurt. I don't want you to go down. I love my people. However, we have to talk, right? And look at what happens next. He doesn't ignore this opportunity. It's not like because this is a very big opportunity. He doesn't just ignore it. He listens to it and he follows through it. And I think this is a big deal. Watch what he does. Verse 8, the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "For this reason," in other words, because we are in trouble, this is the reason, "we have now returned to you, that you may go with us and fight the sons of Ammon and become head over all the inhabitants of Gilead." This is why we've come. Because you're help us, Obi-Wan. You're our only hope. Verse 9, so Jephthah said back to the elders of Gilead, let me get this straight. If you take me back to fight against the sons of Ammon, and the Lord, notice how he phrases it. He doesn't say, and I win. He says, and the Lord gives them to me. Will I become your head? This is the deal you're making? We're going to bury this hatchet, and in doing so, if God's going to allow this, I'm going to go defeat these guys, and you're going to make me the chief? And look at what they said. And the elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, the Lord is witness between us. Now they're making an oath, right? Surely we will do as you have just said. So this is the opportunity. He doesn't just set this aside. He doesn't just lay it down. He confronts the problem, and he brings light to the opportunity that's before him. And I want you to see something. This is a very interesting thing. Notice, if you go back, and I encourage you to do this, go back and read chapter 10. You're not going to see but one phrase where God says, and God, where we believe Samuel, the writer of this text, says, God had mercy on Israel. That's it. It doesn't say that he showed up or he went and called them. Notice who went to Jephthah. Did God go to him? Did God call him? Who goes and gets him? The people of Gilead do. This is a break from all the other judges that up the name of. Now the people are acting on behalf of God. And who's the one bringing up the name of God here? Not the Gileadites. It's Jephthah, the guy who was kicked out, the Robin Hood. He's the one invoking, if God is in this, and I'm not saying he is, but if he's in this, is this really what you guys want to do? So he takes advantage of this opportunity. He doesn't ignore it. And the last thing you see is that he doesn't ignore forgiveness. And I think this is a big act that you see in this man's life. How many of us sitting in this room have been hurt by other people? We've all been hurt. A lot of us have been hurt by people sitting next to us, right? Well, not next to us, on the other side, right? We got to put a whole, you guys are fine, right? But y'all, you're there for a reason, right? You sit on other sides for a reason. Byron, who is it? Who you mad at, brother? Just kidding. We've all been hurt. Forgiveness is a big part of this. And I would say to the church that it's a big part of who we are as we leave and go out of these walls and are the hands and feet of Jesus. If we're going to be the leaders in our community, we've got to realize that the world is not the enemy in the form of the people that we see. I picked up the news this morning, and I'm reading through different news things, and I'm just appalled at the behavior. And my first inclination is to be mad at people. Right? I read it and I'm like, oh, those darn journalists, man, or those politicians. And I get angry at them. And what does Ephesians 6 say our fight is against? Is it against flesh? Blood? No. There's this other world that you can't see, a spiritual world that you and I on a minute by minute, second by second life are fighting against. It's not just that we walk out this door and see everybody who doesn't believe the way we do as the enemy. We've got to be smarter than this. The Word of God teaches us this from tip to tail, that there is a world that's controlled by principalities and rulers, dark forces in the heavenly realm. Right? That we can't see, that are pulling strings, that we don't know. So we have to realize that we're going to get into it with people, but we can't walk out of this room with a grudge in our heart towards anybody on any side. And why can we not do that? Why do we have to walk out of here and live in a world of forgiveness? Why? Because you and I were forgiven a whole lot. Remember what Jesus said when he's at the Pharisee's house and they're having dinner, and this woman of the night, this harlot, comes in and she's weeping on his feet, and she breaks open the jar and she's pouring perfume on his feet, and she's crying and she's wiping his feet with her hair. Right? And what does he say to her? To the men, as they're talking, if he knew who this woman was, he wouldn't even let her touch him. And he says to her, the person who's been forgiven much loves much, right? The person who's forgiven a little loves a little. Guess what, church? Who do you think we exemplify when we leave this building? People who've been forgiven a lot, or people who've been forgiven a little? And as everybody's head kind of tucks down, right? Well, don't look him in the eye. He won't look at me if I don't look at him. I'm right in the same sinking boat, right? We're all in this. We forget how much you and I have been forgiven. But it's been a lot. I want you to know. Ignore this. I've been forgiven a lot, and so have you. And what you see is he doesn't ignore this. Jephthah doesn't ignore the reality that we are to be a people who don't walk out and live in bitter lives. We don't harbor bitterness, but we forgive and we move on. Look at the text that you see here. He kind of, as he goes through this, and we get to verse 11, he says, Jephthah went out with the elders of Gilead. After this little conversation, he doesn't make them say the words to me. Say it. I want to hear you say it. Say, I'm sorry, Jephthah. Say it. He doesn't do that. He doesn't make them grovel. Doesn't make them beg. He just forgets. Just forgives. And he moves on. Would you do this? Would you do what he's asking you to do? We want you to put your life on the line. And we've been a bunch of jerks. Would you do that? Let's keep looking. It says that he went out with the elders and the people made him head. They did what they said they were going to do. And chief over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord at Mizpah. So he's kind of relocates to this area called Mizpah. Mizpah is a word for watchtower, and there was a lot of them. So we don't necessarily know which place it was, but we think, again, it's kind of northern Gilead is where this would be seen as, okay? It was a specific thing. But he goes with them, and he forgives them. He doesn't hold a grudge. So then the next thing you see, well, let me share this with you. And I love this because Abraham Lincoln, as he so eloquently did all his life. There's so many things that he spoke that, and I'm sure there's a million other things that we don't have of his that were just as profound. But I think this is very true. This was a statement that he gave. He said, character is like a tree and reputation like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. So all of a sudden, these people for so long had thought something about this man and put him on a shelf and pushed him away. And now they're seeing the real thing. And I think that's so important of us as a church. It doesn't matter necessarily what our reputation has been in the past, but it's what we do now, the real things, the things that our hands and feet and our heart touch on a daily basis. That is what speaks the most of us, right? What's the old saying about our past? You know, when we think about our past, what's the thing that we're not defined by it, right? It's just a season of life. It's just a piece of our life. You're not defined by who you were. We move on. Okay? So now let's look at the next thing. So we're going to see it. He showed us his reputation. The text has showed us his character. And now the next we're going to see is that he leads in wisdom. And this is an amazing piece here. This is like verse 12 through 28. We're going to kind of pick through it pretty quickly. But there's three things in here I want to pull out because wisdom is such a huge part of leadership, right? Every one of us, if you've ever been in a position of where you've overseen anybody at work or you've led a Bible study, you cannot be unwise. I'll tell you this, one of the areas that I've had to really wrestle through as a pastor is what I say from the pulpit, right? I can say things that come across as very flippant or unwise, and I've had to really watch myself. Mac pulled a clip last week. Bear, we were passing it back and forth of something I said a couple weeks back. It wasn't bad. It was just I was making a voice and saying something funny. So they're like, "Oh, let's take this and play with Chris." And so that gets passed around. You probably have seen the "Boom Jesus Baby" clip, right? Has everybody seen that? All right. Bear pulled out a clip of me acting like a fool up here, right? And so you have to be careful. Why? Because we will all say things or do things sometimes that can be pulled as untrustworthy because they're not wise. They seem reckless. So he's going to seem dangerous even almost. And so what we're going to see him is he's going to lead in a way that's wise. And the first thing you see him, his wisdom comes in the form of diplomacy. See, I believe that this is actually a really, really good thing. Diplomacy is very important in our world, and we don't think about it often, but it is. Now, I want you to think diplomacy is not being political. Okay, now, sometimes in an office setting, I think I'm going to try to speak office setting to everybody who might have this, or on a job, there's somebody you have to be diplomatic with, right? There's always a boss. It doesn't mean that you brown nose or whatever that, but you have to be a little bit, you know who not to make mad. Let's just say that way, right? There's somebody don't make this guy mad. He's the one that signs the check. And we look at that and we say, well, we've got to play this political game. Well, I don't want you to think of it because I think politics now has a bad rep in our country. Why? Yeah, all right? But think diplomatically. Think like a diplomat. What does a diplomat do when we look at our diplomat or our advisors of other countries? What do? When they go over there, they represent the best parts of the United States, right? They are representatives of their king, their people. I want us to remember we have to be diplomatic in this world. We have to recognize that not everybody's going to believe like we do. We have to represent our God and King in such a way that makes those people, that doesn't ignore the truth, but also makes everybody who is not of Christ, a follower of Jesus, that makes sure that they understand that we love them, that we're for them. Our fight's not with you. Our fight is against the spiritual forces of Satan. But we've got to learn to be diplomatic. And watch how he does this. This is an amazing piece. So, as he's going to do, there's several different people that God told Israel when they left the desert, you can't fight these folks. Told they couldn't fight Edom because they're your brothers. They're Esau's sons, right? You can't fight Edom. You can't fight the Moabites because they're Lot's kids. Remember Abraham's nephew Lot? So the Moabites, those are his kids, so they're all relatives. And the Amorites are Lot's kids as well. So whenever they left, you go back to Deuteronomy, I think it's chapter 2, you find that in multiple places, God specifically tells the Israelites, when you go into this land, before you go in there, you need to know you can't fight the Edomites, you can't fight the Moabites, and you can't fight the Amorites, because they're your brothers. You don't fight in the family. It's called civil war. We don't want that, all right? So he's got to somehow, and you see this, he's got to diplomatically try to diffuse this because the Amorites have been raiding and fighting them. So what's he going to do? So watch how he handles this. Verse 12, now Jephthah sent messengers to the king, the sons of Ammon, saying, the sons of Ammon, what is between you and me? Why are you beefing with us, right? That you would come to me to fight against my land. The king of the sons of Ammon said to the messenger of Jephthah, because Israel took away my land when they came up from Egypt, from the Arnon as far as the Jabbok and the Jordan. Sorry, we're not going to say it that way anymore. It's the Jabbok and the Jordan. Therefore, return them peaceably now. Stop right there. Doesn't this kind of sound like Israel for the last 4,000 years? You took my land. I'm going to get it back. Wait. This is our land. This has been our land. God gave this land to us. No, that's my land. I want it back. Keep going. Verse 14, and Jephthah sent messengers again to the king of the sons of Ammon, and they said to him, thus says Jephthah, Israel did not take away the land of Moab, nor the lands of the sons of Ammon. In other words, Lot's kids, we didn't take your land. So let me explain this a little bit. So, and I think I have some pieces of some graphic I want to show you. So we're going to go back 300 years to about 1405 BC. Right now, Jephthah, we're at about 1100 BC. Let's go back to about 1405. And in 1405 BC, what you see is Israel is moving into the land. They're about to move into the land. Show the first graphic that I have up there. So this is, if you look, I know it's kind of small. I'm sorry. I made it as big as I could. I tried to enhance it a little bit. But what you see at the bottom of this graphic is, as Israel was coming out of the desert of Sinai, the first people they encountered were the Edomites. And in Numbers chapter 20, they approach the Edomites and say, hey, please let us pass through peacefully your land to the other side where God has provided a place for us. And they said no. And so what did Israel do? Did they ignore God? No. They knew this was wrong, so they kept on moving. Next graphic. They went up to the Moabites and said, knock, knock, knock. Hey, please let us pass through to the other side, to the place where God has provided for us. And the Moabites said, nope, you can't do it. So they left again. Hit it again, Dave. Oh, you're ahead of me. So they move up to the border of the Ammonite land. And there at the bottom of the Arnon River, there where it comes, they camp. And they go to the Ammonites, and they said, please let us go through your land so that we may go through to the place God has provided for us. And what did they do? They said no. And not only did they say no, God made them attack Israel. So now what happens when, if they'd have just said no, what would Israel have done? They stayed put because they can't fight them. We're stuck. God, you've already made a command here. What are we going to do? Well, God makes the Amorites come down and fight against Israel. Not only did they say no, they attacked them right there at Arnon. And what happened? God delivered the Ammonites into the hands of the Israelites. So what happens when you defeat a country? You take over their territory. So now all of that east of the Jordan became actually Gad, which is also Gilead, and Reuben to the south of it is from the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Dead Sea. You have this now is Israelite land because the Ammonites came down and fought. Did Israel fight against them? No. The Ammonites came and fought against Israel. And here's what's interesting. That happened. And specifically, before then, the Ammonites had taken this land from the Moabites. Now look at your next piece. Not only is he wise specifically in his diplomacy, but he's wise in his history. Because in this text, going down from verse 16 all the way down to verse 19 into verse 20, he gives a history lesson to the kings of Ammon. He basically walks them back through. Let me just tell you, I know my past. I know my country's past. I know my people's past. I know who we are and what we've done, and let me tell it to you. We didn't steal your land. You fought against us, and we won. And then we gave you back a whole chunk of it. We just took the pieces by the Jordan, right? So, why are you beefing with me? And notice what he says here. Look in verse 20. But Sihon did not trust Israel to pass through his territory. This is the king in Numbers chapter 21. He didn't trust him. But Sihon gathered all his people and camped at Yahatz and fought with Israel. And the Lord, the God of Israel, gave Sihon and all his people into the hands of Israel. And they defeated them, so Israel possessed all the land of the Amorites, the inhabitants of that country. He's telling him this. You understand. Why has this been cool with everybody for the last 300 years? Here's what it would be like. This is what it would be like. If all of a sudden Britain showed up on the coast and said, give us our land back. And if France showed up down in Louisiana and said, we would like our land back, please. And if the Spanish showed up at the edge of Texas and said, whatever. Not going to even try it. Right? And now everybody wanted their land back. But wait, it's been almost 250 years. What are you doing? This is not your land. We won it. Fair and square, according to the rules of law and the rules of war. And now he has to give him this history lesson. So you see that he's wise. He's not just some thug in the mountain. And guess what, church? We need to know who we are as well. Can I tell you, I know so many people. We have an apologetics class tonight. I'm so excited. Walt's been teaching. It's been fantastic. And I made this point last time we met in the class. I said, it's really interesting. I love apologetics. It's fun to learn truths about reality and about science and about worldview and culture and how we can know how to rightfully defend the hope that God has put in us correctly. Our own word, what we want to do. But I've found so many Christians don't even know the truths of their own word, let alone trying to understand someone else's. How do I understand the cultures and the religions of the world and how to defend Christianity against them when I don't even know my own? So what we see is his wisdom speaks in his own history. He doesn't have to do much but just tell the past. What do we do as Christians? What are we telling when we tell the gospel? We're telling a story of the past, right? Let me tell you about this man who came to earth. He was God in flesh, and he lived a perfect life, and he died on a cross. The purpose for that death was to take your sin from you and put it on himself and to take his righteousness and give it to you. And then they laid him in a tomb, and 3 days later, check this out, he rose from the grave. How do you know that? We have so many eyewitnesses, Roman, Christian, Jewish historians and sources that all wrote about it. People saw it. He gets out of the grave and he walks around for almost 50 days. And people saw him. That's the past. That's our story, right? It's called the gospel. He died for you. To trust in him, that you may have eternal life. The world, we need to know our story so that when we walk out this door and we speak to the world, that the history of our people for centuries past can be exalted through the name of Jesus Christ, right? That's what we do. And you see the wisdom in this as he speaks his history. And then lastly, I think this is so great as he knows his theology. His wisdom is evident in his theology. Now watch what he does here. And this is where apologetics really comes into play. And Walt, you could totally use this tonight if you want. They may have already heard it, but just do it anyway. It'd be great. So look at verse 24. He says, do you not possess what Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? Now, he's kind of going on an understanding that the God who is the biggest is the God who wins, right? If your God's big, then the wars you fight, he will fight for you and you will win your wars, right? You possess land because your God gave you that land. That's the understanding of all those cultures, from the Edomite, the Moabite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Philistine. All these cultures understood that we pray hard enough, our God will ultimately listen to us, and if he's a big enough God, he's going to win for us. So he plays on this concept of, wait. Didn't Chemosh, don't you have the land that Chemosh gave you? When we came through, what happened? But I want you to see a little something differently here. Chemosh is not the Amorite God. Did you know that? He plays this. Chemosh is the Moabite God. Molech is the Amorite God. And some historians or some theologians believe that he just made a mistake. He didn't know. I don't think so. I think he knew. Because who gave the Amorites, what land did Israel take from them? It was land previously that the Amorites had taken from the Moabites. So he's playing on this. He's saying, hey. You're coming to me after 300 years. Why don't you go back to Chemosh, the Moabite God, who you took this land from before? Did he not give that land to you when you took it? You see how he's playing it? Look at what he says. Do you not possess what Chemosh, the God, your God, gives you to possess? So whatever the Lord our God has driven out before us, we will possess it. Look in verse 25. Now, are you any better than Balak, sons of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever strive with Israel? In other words, did the Moabites come to get their land back after you took their land, we took it from you? Did they come to get it from us? Did they pick a fight like you're trying to pick a fight? Because that used to be our land. Is that what, did they do that? Look at what he says. Did they ever strive with Israel, or did he ever fight against them? Verse 26, while Israel lived in the Heshbon and in its villages, and in the Aurora. I lived in a city next to a city called Aurora, so it's hard. Aurora, that's what I want to say, Aurora. And its villages, and in all the cities that are on the banks of the Arnon, 300 years. Why did you not recover them within that time? And therefore I therefore have not sinned against you, but you are doing me wrong by making war against me. May the Lord, the judge today between the sons of Israel and the sons of Ammon. You see, he knows his God. He knows his history. And he doesn't even just know his history. He knows the worldviews and the cultures of the people around him. Why does he know this? Because as a leader, God has prepared him to step out into the world and speak the truth. Not just flounder, not just get out there and not be prepared. They're prepared because he's studied the book of Deuteronomy in his time. He obviously knows Numbers, the book of Numbers. He obviously knows the book of Deuteronomy, the second giving of the law of God. He's obviously spent time because he went back and almost quoted it verbatim to them. So here's a man who's leading in wisdom. He's leading in reputation. He's leading diplomacy. You see him over and over again. He's bringing to his people qualities. And we as a church should look at this and analyze and go, is this who we are? And as we walk away, here's the last thing I want us to see. You know, we could pull away one piece. If we were to say, Chris, what one thing should we walk away from this? Obviously, there's a lot in here that you and I can apply to our own life and our own ways we lead our families and in our worlds. But here's the one thing I want us to really fall back on. I want you to recognize that God can use you and me regardless of our past. Isn't this amazing? So many of us look back on the years that we've spent, whether we use the term pre-Christ or post-Christ in our life, right? And we're ashamed. Maybe even post-Christ, there's times where you're ashamed. I know I am. We look back and we say to ourselves, God can't use me because of what I did. And I want you to realize that that's not true. And this is a great example of it. And it doesn't mean that that God's not going to grow us and sanctify us and turn us into the men and women who are useful to Him. He is. But I think if we could pull anything away from here as we walk through His leadership, it's that your leadership and my leadership is not bound and connected so solely to our past that it alters any possible future that we might have. The reason I know this is because Jephthah is not alone in this reality of the people of the Bible, is he? From the very beginning all the way to the very end. You don't just see, the Bible is not a Facebook Bible where all you see are the good, beautiful things of all the people in it, right? You see the sin. You see the dirt. You see the problems. And God uses every single one of these people to affect His kingdom. Now, look around. Sometimes we put on a Facebook church, right? We show up. I look good. Because I don't want you to see, man, maybe I've been struggling. Maybe I'm hurting. But I want you all to know that you're not so tethered to your past that it takes away your future for the Lord. He can use every single one of us.